Hi, I'm John Green. Welcome to my salon. This is Mental Floss Video. And did you know that in 2015, archaeologists found fossils of rats the size of small dogs from 44,000 years ago? I'm not exaggerating, by the way. The largest rat was about 11 pounds, making it 10 times larger than the ones we're used to, and approximately the same size as my childhood miniature dachshund Red Green. These rats were unearthed in East Timor in Southeast Asia, and let us hope we never see their likes again. Anyway, that's the first of many interesting archaeological discoveries I'm going to tell you about today. We're not going to talk much about dinosaurs, so if that's what you're interested in, check out our episode all about them. Today it's all about giant rats, giant birds, and missing pharaoh teeth. So let's start with possibly the most famous archaeological find, the Rosetta Stone. It was discovered by French soldiers in 1799, and it's from the 2nd century BCE. What's important about the Rosetta Stone is that it has writing all over it in 3 different languages: Greek, Egyptian Demotic, and Egyptian hieroglyphics. And because all 3 passages say the same thing, it helped scholars to learn about hieroglyphics. In early 2016, archaeologists in the UK found a well-preserved wheel from the Bronze Age, and while older wheels have been found, this one is unique because it was still attached to its hub, and experts say it probably came from a cart. In 1993, mummies from the Pazyryk culture were unearthed in southern Siberia, and they were extremely well preserved thanks to embalming methods. One famous find was the Siberian Ice Maiden from the 5th century BCE. Her left shoulder is covered in tattoos of animals and flowers that you can still see. So if you've got a great tattoo, remember to get embalmed. Just kidding, it's not going to matter. In 2012, the bones of English King Richard III were found underneath a former parking lot. He died at the Battle of Bosworth Field in 1485, and scientists were able to identify him thanks to DNA from his relatives. They were also able to examine his bones to find out about his diet, which included peacock and heron. Similar DNA testing happened when a gourd emerged from a private collection in 2010, and it was believed the gourd contained remnants of blood from King Louis XVI, but it didn't. Scientists found 3 descendants of the Bourbon family, but none of their DNA matched the blood. Archaeology so often proves that reality is less cool than the legends. It's like the opposite of Indiana Jones. Anyway, in 2007, archaeologists thought they had discovered the tomb of King Herod the Great a few miles south of Jerusalem. It was a 32 by 32 foot tomb with 3 separate coffins inside, but it was likely too small for a 1st century BCE king, so probably no Herod in there. The moa was a flightless bird from New Zealand. It's extinct now, but in the 1980s, archaeologists found a giant moa claw similar to a dinosaur claw from about 3,300 years ago, and it looked like it had just died because it was mummified in a dark cave, and it's big. I mean, these birds could be up to 12 feet tall. There's an archaeological site in western Iran which was discovered in the 1960s, and from it, researchers have learned a lot about the ancient Mesopotamians. One of the buildings had a fireplace, bowls, and windows, leading archaeologists to believe that it was a 4th century BCE drive-through, basically. Others argue that this was how soldiers received weapons. Also, throughout the past decade, archaeologists have been uncovering a possible tavern from the Roman Empire. The site is in southern France, and it's believed that the structure is about 2,100 years old. It could also be a bakery or a private dining facility, but I prefer to think of it as a bar. And speaking of the Roman Empire, in 2014, archaeologists found what they believe to be the oldest known Roman temple from about the 7th century BCE. To reach the site, they had to tunnel 15 feet underground, a full 7 feet below the waterline of the nearby Tiber River. The Romans also had mysterious dodecahedra from the 2nd through 3rd centuries CE. We don't exactly know what they were, but about 100 of them have been discovered over the years. They're small, hollowed-out shapes with 12 sides, and experts think they might have been candle holders, or dice, or pipe pieces. There's a lot of guesswork in archaeology, but then sometimes things get proven in surprising ways. Like, archaeologists debated for decades which of 2 mummies was the famous female pharaoh Hatshepsut. They knew one was a queen and the other her nurse, but they didn't know which was which. But then, in 2007, about a century after the tomb was uncovered, scientists scientists did scans of the bodies and the jars that contained the pharaoh's organs, and there was a molar in one jar containing the pharaoh's organs, and one of the bodies was missing that molar. So that was Hatshepsut. Let that be a lesson to you, by the way. If you can't be a queen's nurse, because for a century people won't be able to tell you apart. One of the great mysteries of early US history is the 16th century colony on Roanoke Island in modern-day North Carolina that completely disappeared with only a message carved into a tree reading Croatan. The 100 or so settlers were never heard from again, but some archaeologists continue to look for clues. One of their sites is near Salmon Creek, and here pottery, rivets, and other artifacts have been found, but there's no way to prove their origins. Well, until we find a molar in a jar. In the early 2000s, archaeologists found an entire palace under a parking lot in Jerusalem. After convincing officials that it was worth it to tear apart an entire parking lot, it turned out to be the living quarters of Queen Helena of Adiabene, who ruled during the 1st century CE. Speaking of unusual archaeological methods, in 2012, a badger in Germany was digging and came across a human pelvic bone. The area was then excavated, and people found that the badger had actually unearthed a 12th century gravesite. Discovering pieces of clay and coins is not unusual for archaeologists, but some of these finds are more exciting than others. Like in the 1970s, an archaeologist purchased a clay seal from an antiques dealer. Its text read, "Belonging to Baruch ben Neriah, who was the prophet Jeremiah's scribe." It also contained a fingerprint, although its authenticity hasn't been confirmed. And in 1957, a coin was found in the state of Maine resembling an 11th century Norwegian silver penny. This is the earliest dated Norse artifact to ever be found in the US, and it's possible that the Vikings made it all the way to Maine when they voyaged to North America. Around the 1950s, about 33,000 clay figurines of mysterious origins were discovered in Mexico, and many of them contained people alongside dinosaurs. Now, it didn't take long before archaeologists officially stated that these were fakes, but some outsiders decided that they were proof that dinosaurs and people must have coexisted. That noted, by using thermoluminescent dating, experts found that the clay was probably fired around 1939. Also in the 1950s, the Toland man was discovered in Denmark. He was unearthed in a bog that had preserved his body so well he was initially thought to be a contemporary murder victim. But he'd actually died in the 4th century BCE. He was so well preserved that experts were able to learn that he ate porridge between 12 and 24 hours before he died. So if you want to be remembered and you're gonna die, and you are, I would recommend dying in a bog. But speaking of ancient food, in 2015, the world's oldest cheese was discovered in the tombs of China's Taklamakan Desert. It was from around 1615 BCE and actually was on the bodies of mummies because, you know, people back then buried their dead with a snack for later. By the way, for the record, no longer edible. In East England, there's an archaeological site known as Sutton Hoo. It was first excavated in 1939 when a 90-foot-long 7th century ship was dug up. The ship burial was a way that some Anglo-Saxons buried their dead. There are tons of amazing artifacts at the site, and you can actually visit it today. Well, you can visit it today if you're in Sutton. Otherwise, it might take you a day to get there. But moving on to underwater discoveries, around the year 1900, divers in Greece found a few ancient artifacts, including the famous Antikythera mechanism. It dates back to around 205 BCE, and it's sometimes called the world's oldest computer. We don't know exactly what it was used for, but it may have served as a mechanical calendar. Similarly, there's the Baghdad battery, which was unearthed in 1938. It's basically a clay jar with copper around an iron bar inside. It's from around 250 BCE, and it's one of the earliest examples we have of a functioning battery, although it's impossible to say what it powered. Also underwater, the Japanese Atlantis, which was discovered by a diver as well, but in 1986. Since then, marine geologists have studied the structure. One is a pyramid that's 250 feet long, but experts are still debating whether the city was from 10,000 years ago, or 2,000 to 3,000, or even if it's man-made at all, which just goes to show you that there is a lot we don't know when it comes to archaeology. Archaeologists have an interesting way of tracking the trail that Lewis and Clark took about 200 years ago in the United States. Basically, the men on the exhibition had a low-fiber diet, so they often took laxatives containing mercury chloride, and the mercury didn't get digested, so we can figure out where they went based on on the mercury contents in the soil to this day. There's 10 to 15,000 year old rock art at a lake bed near Reno, Nevada, and these are known as petroglyphs. They contain a lot of complicated artistic designs whose meanings we just don't know. On a slightly different note, in 2012, a couple in Devon, England discovered a medieval well under their living room. Colin Steer had known that something was off with his house's foundation for years, and when he retired, he started digging and eventually found the 33-foot deep well dating back to the 16th century. And finally, I returned to my salon to tell you about the Terracotta Army. These thousands of statues were discovered by Chinese farmers digging a well in 1974. The figures were built during the Qin dynasty around 221 to 207 BCE, and there are about 8,000 life-size soldiers in addition to horses and chariots. This was probably decoration for the tomb of Emperor Qin Shi Huangdi. All of this was found within a 20-square-mile area. Thanks for watching Mental Floss video, which is made with the help of all of these nice people. In the comments, let me know if you've ever seen any of these places or artifacts in person. I have seen parts of the Terracotta Army, and wow, is it impressive. Anyway, thanks again for watching, and as we say in my hometown, don't forget to be awesome.